People say the craziest things. They say they won't buy AVs until they can charge as quickly and as easily as filling up with petrol. The government says we need between 280,000 and 480,000 public chargers by 2030, excluding private and workplace chargers. They also say the UK will have between 10 and 14 million EVs on the road by 2030. They say we need to add 53,000 new public chargers per year just to stay on target. Well, just who is they? Who are these people making these wild claims? I'm Dave. This is Dave Takes It On. Well, the CMA report making these claims was prepared for the UK government way back in 2020. It's 5 years ago. Competition and Marketing Authority, back then, made some forecasts about the number of public chargers needed to match the number of EVs forecast to be on the roads. But the first thing that strikes me is the 280,000 to 480,000. That's just about double or half, depending which way you look at it. Is it 480,000? Is it 280,000? Well, to put it into context, there are 8,000 petrol stations in the whole of the UK, and there are probably around 10 pumps on average per location. So about 80,000 individual petrol pumps, and we've got 35 million cars on the road. So the forecast for EVs and public chargers are wildly different to ICE and the number of petrol pumps we have. ICE, you see, has 437 cars per petrol pump, and EVs apparently need to number no more than 30. Well, this seems to be a bit of a mismatch. Are the government estimates and projections wildly wrong? How can EVs need this many? Oh, by the way, that figure, as stated, excludes all home chargers right down to the humble 3-pin plug, and also all workplace chargers. That's a massive number. Now, I know we hear ad nauseum that EVs take longer to charge. That's that ridiculous 5-minute comparison. But 15 times as long? Is that realistic? That would imply that each EV takes 75 minutes to charge to get to that parity. That's not a realistic figure, not now anyhow. Are our CPOs all hurtling towards installing tens of thousands of public EV ultra-rapid chargers that are just not needed? See, we are at a point 5 years after this report was completed that finds we have 1.4 million EVs on the road, and that's about 10% of what this report believes we'll have in 2030, 5 years from now. And according to that map, which provides data to the government, we now have 39,427 locations, 79,654 devices, 114,700 connectors. Relate that to around 80,000 individual petrol pumps. If we could charge up in 5 minutes, we would already be at our 2030 target. They don't, or at least not yet. So how are we coping? We are at 10% of the projected EVs to be on the road by 2030, and we actually already have nearly 25% of the higher figure for public charges needed. If we take the lower figure, 280,000, right now we have over 40% of what they forecast we're going to need. We are miles ahead already. We have a ratio of about 30 EVs per public charger connector versus the 437 cars per pump that petrol and diesel cars have to put up with. Now, I do travel the country, and my destinations are nearly always public or private chargers where we film. That's what the channel is. What am I finding out there? Well, in 3 words, chargers are deserted. Yeah, I know you can find queues, but you can also find queues at petrol stations. You just try to fill up on a bank holiday Monday. The average petrol station has just a handful of cars at any one time during the day, and are pretty much deserted overnight, although in reality, many of them are deserted because they're closed. They do have peak times where you will have to queue, maybe 1 or 2 cars ahead of you, but as everyone tells me, that quickly clears, and most people rarely wait longer than about 10 minutes to fill up. Well, EV chargers, well, they're just deserted. They're all open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, but from about 8 p.m. to 7 a.m, they're simply deserted, not a car in sight. And this is not just only my own observations I use here. All the public rapid and ultra-rapid chargers have apps that show live utilisation 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can click on a location and see instantly how many chargers they have, how many are out of order, and how many are being used. You don't even need to do calculations because they also tell you how many are vacant. And they are vacant in absolutely huge numbers. Now, EVs are not the same as petrol cars. We know that. Every single petrol and diesel car has to drive to a petrol station to fill up. They've got no choice. You cannot build a petrol station in your garage. No house has a built-in petrol pump. Not even businesses have them. They could, but they don't have them. Companies with huge fleets of ICE cars never build their own petrol pumps on their own premises. So their drivers also have to go to the petrol stations. EVs don't. EVs only need an electric supply, and that is provided in every single house and every single building in the country. Anyone who can park near one can charge. Now, before you shout about I can't charge at home, I never said that. I never said you could. I said anyone who can park near one. That includes homes, but also car parks, fast food restaurants, coffee shops, hotels, offices, hospitals. In fact, any building you can mention, and many locations not even near a building, like National Trust car parks or beach car parks, and now roads and streets.
I come out of my house, this is in the boot of my car, for example.
Yep.
Just take this out, I hold it up over the charge point. The metal plate here is locked in place normally. When you hold this up, the electromagnetics...
So that's your unlock key.
The unlock key essentially enables that to unlock. This then slots into place. And there are some pins in there which shoot out. And they lock this in place. So when you're actually charging, nobody can just come along and take this out.
Right, and there's an individual identifier in there, so you can literally plug in. Could you plug into one in a different city?
In theory, you can.
If someone went down to visit someone in London, could they plug that in there and you'd know who it is?
Yes. So in theory, any adapter, Trojan adapter, will work any Trojan charge point.
In fact, I suspect that every single EV ever made parks next to an electricity supply for the majority of its life. Park in your drive, you got an electricity nearby. Park in a street, and you will soon have electricity nearby. Okay, not every lamppost has a usable supply. There are a few that do have. But we're looking here at 2030 and the likely number of EV chargers we will need in the next 5 years. And we now have companies rapidly adding EV chargers to lampposts, or installing cable gullies to properties without off-street parking, or retractable chargers that sink down into the pavement when not in use. Look around the UK at motorway services, and EV Hubs revealed that unless you're very unlucky, you'll never find one full. I say unlucky because, just like filling up with petrol on a bank holiday Monday, it's likely to find queues, so EV chargers also have the busy times when you find them full. Anyone who deliberately goes out at these times and tries to charge deserves everything they get. Whoa, comments are flooding in, no doubt. It's all right for me, I'm rich, I'm retired, I can charge at home, etc, etc, etc. But just think about it a minute. A modern EV has a range now which is greater than the average distance driven each week. So for those that cannot charge at home, ever, they need to charge just once a week. Now, if you work, many of you do, you drive to work and home from work 10 times a week. And the average journey to about 7 miles takes about 20 minutes. Is anyone out there brave enough to state that every single EV charger they pass twice a day, 5 days a week, is always absolutely full? Not a single one with a vacant charger on any single day of the week? I don't believe you. But we then have the weekend. Is there anyone stupid enough to claim that every single EV public charger is fully occupied from daylight to nightfall and not a single one can be found that is vacant? Go on, I dare you to claim that. Well, we actually have two problems. The first is that people got into a habit with their petrol cars over many years or decades and simply do not change when they get their first EV. They expect, they demand that they can charge that exactly the same as their old petrol car. If they previously stopped off once a week or so on the way home to top up their tank, they want to stop once a week on the way home and expect to find those chosen public chargers have vacancies. When they find one location that is actually full, they then go moaning about lack of infrastructure. Yet they go back there time and time again at exactly the same time of day and find exactly the same queues and moan exactly the same. Was it Einstein that was credited with saying that the definition of lunacy is to do exactly the same thing time after time and expect different results? Well, the second is that they demand to be able to charge at their chosen charger at whatever price that one offers, in preference to the myriad of dearer ones that they pass that are totally deserted. We don't have a shortage of EV chargers. We have a shortage of EV chargers that people choose to charge at. They drive past countless vacant chargers to their chosen supplier. And in this, I totally agree, but only up to a point. The reason their chosen charger is probably way busier than the others that they pass on the way is probably because the others are dearer, and the vast majority of EV drivers who need to use public chargers, they also know this. It's not a secret. So you face a choice. Either you pay more at the other chargers, which have vacant bays and find no queues, or you go to the cheaper ones at a time when they are much less likely to have full chargers and are more likely to have multiple vacancies. Is this rocket science? Once again, the comments will be coming in thick and fast. Let me remind you, I worked as a sales rep calling on private houses for about 20 years of my working life. I have a wife and 3 children. And my average appointment was during the daytime for retired people and evenings for the workers. The average home I visited had 2 people. It was a couple, children were out of the way, and each of those was sitting in their own seats, they're not sharing a sofa, watching the TV for several hours each evening and night, and often eating their dinners off a tray on their laps. The average couple were... No, let me leave it there before I accept too many people. I found that the arrival of a salesman with a product or service that they were interested in and had inquired about for a quote was greeted like a breath of fresh air. They were bored out of their minds. It was something different, something new. I was the evening's entertainment. Now, if anyone out there is trying to convince me they cannot find half an hour or so once a week to go out on a specific trip to charge their EV at the cheapest place they can find, where and when there are no queues, then I just have no comment on your lifestyle and your work-life balance. Well, it's bad. Too many people make no effort to work out a new structure for charging their new EV. Far too many just expect the system to adapt to their demands. I film and recently wanted to film at a busy charger in the Lake District on a bank holiday weekend. Now, this one specific day, I had an early night. I got up at 6 a.m, set off immediately. It was a glorious day. Sun was just rising. Roads were totally deserted. And when I got to where I was going, T-Bay Motorway Services in the Lake District, where I was filming, it was absolutely deserted. I was the only car at the charger, and there's 12 bays there. I went in for a breakfast and I had the place to myself. It was heaven. No queuing for food, no searching for a vacant table. I had a really nice, quiet, leisurely breakfast. I went out, I filmed a lot of B-roll background stuff, and it was not until 10 a.m. before the cars started arriving. By 11 a.m, services, restaurant was packed, and the petrol station now had queues. The car park was filling up. By lunchtime, it was pretty much absolutely full. Everything was busy, crowded, packed. Strangely, the EV chargers I'd come to film never got totally full. At any one time, there was always just one, sometimes more, vacant charger, but vacant nonetheless. This is lifestyle choice. That one day, I made my choice and got exactly what I would hope to get. Are we now so rigid in our habits that we can no longer change to make our lives so much better? Well, this last bank holiday, we were in the middle of a long, hot spell. We've not had rain or even clouds for several weeks, and I had no filming planned. I live within sight of the M6. I can see it out the window, which is the main route up north to either Blackpool or the Lake District. Yeah, I know it goes further than that, but these are the targets on a bank holiday Monday. Most people don't drive further than that. Well, I sit and watch the traffic, and it's just so predictable. Oh, by the way, a wise driver once said that you are not in traffic, you are the traffic. To the guy behind you, you're the one holding him up. Anyway, the answer to our public charging strategy is that the cars have changed in the last 5 years. The batteries have changed in the last 5 years. The speed of charging has changed in the last 5 years. We haven't. Now, for those who can charge at home, a modern EV can now provide all the range that you need for a day out. 200-mile range is about standard now. 300 is now quite common. Many carry out trips that no longer need you to charge on a road trip or a day out to the beach. Now, for those that cannot charge at home, same applies. Charge up near where you live and the need for charging en route is often eliminated. Now, be honest, how many people travel 200 miles on a bank holiday? No, not that many. But for those that do, charging 20% to 80% is now down in time to about 10 to 20 minutes. Barely time to go and have a pee, stretch your legs and grab a coffee. The latest Tesla, XPeng, Hyundai, BYD, they can add 150 to 200 miles far faster than you can grab a lunch. We have an issue with pricing, and the belief that we have a lack of chargers is masking this. Yes, we can charge just about anywhere today, but we don't want to go there. We want to go to the cheapest chargers, and they are rarer, and because they're rarer and cheaper, they're always busy. The report also seems to overlook the fact that most people can and do charge at home, and many never ever use a public charger. Those that do, it's usually only to charge at a public charger on 1 or 2 occasions a year when we go on a road trip. Quick look round the larger EV charging hubs today with the likes of GridServe, Osprey and Instavolt reveals a pattern. They're not being used. Even the massive new hub just installed by Instavolt in Winchester at the time is showing 39 out of 44 available 10 a.m. And at 3 p.m, it's 44 out of 45 available. Now that on its own must be scary to a CPO who is planning on installing or already has installed a new multi-bay hub. Will they get any customers? Well, it's doubly scary because it has been deserted since it opened a month back. The price with Instavolt is obviously a killer, 85 pence, and that might explain everything, but they introduced a 54 pence off-peak overnight rate, and that was not packed out. What must be sending shivers up CPO spines is that 11 minutes past 10 this morning, the daytime rate was 50 pence and it was still deserted, 39 available. I think a few too many people watch Field of Dreams and believe that if they built it, they would come. They haven't. At 50p, they definitely should have. What's gone wrong? Well, that is a complicated subject, but the least should be that it's recognised that data from 5 years ago cannot be relied upon to predict what the future needs will be. The government needs to launch a new study into what is happening today and check if their calculations from 2020 are still valid. They also need to look at how we use our EVs and chargers today with the changes in technology and see if that actually negates the original data. They also need to look to the future because right now we are at the future that was predicted 5 years ago and it is not what they predicted. We could be chasing a petrol station repeat where first petrol station built in 1919. By the 70s, that had grown in number to almost 40,000. Many small shops in villages had a single pump of their own on the outside. Today, petrol station numbers have dwindled to around 8,000 and they're still shrinking. Now, if private companies want to invest on false data in the hope of making a killing, that's fine, they can take the risk. If the government is funding or subsidising EV chargers to be absolutely everywhere using public money, that's a very different matter. It might be time for a change of strategy. Maybe the government should start looking into the third of the population that own cars but cannot charge at home. Because charging at home, well, it's actually no longer the problem. See, many people, they don't know it, but they don't necessarily want to charge at home. What they want is to be able to charge at the ridiculously low rates that those who can charge at home enjoy. In other words, they might be answering a problem, this is the government, with their current strategy that simply does not exist. Now, we met recently with Ubertricity, and they're installing bidirectional chargers into lampposts. And XPeng and BYD are installing bidirectional charging into all their new EVs. By 2027, Ubertricity believes EVs will be able to contribute into the grid. Now, an average car sits there empty and idle for 90% of every day. In the future, EVs can and will become a part of the grid. They can plug in when they're parked. They can use some of the batteries for charging up at off-peak times when we have a massive surplus of electricity. And no, that's not always overnight. At midday in the summer on a windy day, the solar and wind farms are now regularly producing far more than the grid can take, and the grid is actually installing storage batteries to take it up. That excess that the grid cannot take could easily be stored in EV batteries. But as the sun sets and the wind drops, a million or so EVs, all plugged in with full batteries, can release some of that back as a much-needed boost back into the grid at peak times. This is not the type of charger that the government is insisting CPOs install in simply massive numbers. All those are just one-way chargers. They charge, full stop. Somebody wake them up before they waste all our money. It's not how many they install any longer, but what they install. I'm Dave. Want to support the channel? Get access to behind-the-scenes content. That includes channel meetups. Join as a member today. Details in the description down below.